I want to start off saying that it's hard to run a campaign for International Women's Day or any similar kind of event as a brand, because it's so easy to come across like you're just jumping on the bandwagon, especially if ironically there's no context behind why you're saying what you're saying. But Vera Moda, the fashion brand, they ran a campaign last year for International Women's Day, and they've carried it on through this year as well, where they've teamed up with a female ambassador to support empowerment of women in Uganda, through a partnership with a sustainable skincare company called Kayo. Kieran, I've got a slide on slide 4, which there's a video, it'll explain it better than I can, but essentially Vera Moda have created a new clothing line of t-shirts, I think it is, where all their profits go towards Kayo and the work that they do in Uganda. So if you just want to play a few bits of that.
Amazing. Are we on the right one here?
Yes.
Fantastic. Fingers crossed the audio works for everyone at home.
My name is Elena Carrier, and I am the ambassador for Vera Moda's International Women's Day campaign. I recently traveled to Uganda with Vera Moda to visit the female-led social enterprise, Kayo. I was lucky enough to meet the women Kayo works with, who Vera Moda directly supports with this campaign. Arriving in Uganda, my first impression was that it was a very vibrant and gorgeous country. But behind the beautiful exterior lies a turbulent history. The people of northern Uganda have suffered the terrible consequences of civil war, and it has only been about 10 years since the nightmare ended. Kidnapping, rape, murder, and slavery were once the unfortunate truth of everyday life here. On my visit, I was fortunate enough to meet remarkably resilient women who, despite their experiences, have rebuilt their lives and are now at the heart of a thriving enterprise. With Vera Moda's support, these women have been able to realize their dreams of a better future. The women working with Kayo have started their own businesses collecting, producing, and selling shea butter lotions on the local market. To further the project's impact, Vera Moda donates all profits from the sale of their International Women's Day capsule collections. This donation funds education programs in economics, sales, and marketing, helping the women manage their finances and take ownership of their futures. I am incredibly proud to be part of this project and share this uplifting message of hope and strength to all women all over the world. You can. No matter your background, it is so important to believe in yourself. So let's inspire each other, lift each other up, and do whatever we can to help women all over and around the world.
That was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's basically just an example of women supporting women. I think it's so easy for brands to get involved, which we'll talk about a little bit later, in International Women's Day without having any backing behind why they're saying what they're saying and kind of doing it for the sake of it, just to jump on the hashtag or something like that. Whereas you can see that Vera Moda are actually doing something. I'm working with them all year round, but kind of using International Women's Day to promote it even further.
Amazing. Hannah, you shared one with us earlier. Do you want to talk a little bit about that campaign? Well, not necessarily a campaign, but it's certainly content marketing.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I'm obsessed with it this year. So if you could pull up slide 7 just to highlight what I'm talking about. So the one that I picked this year, which has really stood out for me, is the Lego campaign. So I don't know about you guys, but Lego was like my thing as a child. I built everything. And there's a really iconic campaign, a little bit before my time, but from 1981, based on like what it is that's beautiful, I think, advert. I realise I've not dropped that on there, so my bad. But essentially, like, they've recreated it based on kind of like what women aspire to be today. So obviously women today aspire to be absolutely everything, and we can be absolutely everything. And it just really highlighted to me, like, they've kind of worked with loads of different children or girls from kind of loads of different countries and asked them to kind of build what it is that they want to build, and kind of like encourage them to become female leaders and kind of focusing on this female builders. And for me, it really stood out to me because they've kind of repurposed something that worked so well 30 years ago and kind of updated it with the times. And I think for me, that's what content marketing is all about, just kind of moving with the times and being relevant. And I think this, for me, kind of encapsulates women today in terms of like, we can do anything, we can be anything. you just have to kind of put your mind to it, and that's why it really stood out for me.
Amazing. Such a cool campaign.
There's hundreds. I would definitely have it. They've made loads and loads of images. If you have a little Google of Lego 2021 International Women's Day campaign, there's loads and loads of images that they've used, and I was obsessed with them. I scrolled through them for hours the other night, so I would recommend.
Amazing. Charlotte, have you seen any campaigns that you've liked so far?
Yes, I mean, I was having a look this morning, actually, in between meetings, to see if there was anything, good coming out today that was worth commenting on. One that caught my eye was an Interflora campaign they launched for International Women's Day. I think, I don't know if anyone's seen it, basically.
Oh, that was me flicking through the slides and it's happening. Sorry. It was one of the video slides. It's on autoplay. I do apologize.
That's all right, no worries. So I've not got a slide on it, but basically they've created bouquets to highlight gender inequality. So for example, 1 in 20 CEOs are women, so the bouquet is all white flowers and then only one of them is a red flower, and they've done the same for like salary and the gender pay gap and stuff like that. I think what struck me, it was quite good about it, is that they've really tied into the key message of this year's International Women's Day, which is choose to challenge. So they're kind of bringing out these inequalities into a really like impactful visual campaign that is, and because they're such a well-known brand, I think it's really going to get the message out there. I think they're also launching a bouquet to celebrate Whitney Wolf Herd, who's the CEO of Bumble, and she's like the first ever like self-made female billionaire, and she's like awesome. She's like my hero. They've got a bouquet to celebrate her as well, which I thought was really cool. So yeah, that would be mine. Wasn't
Bumble her second dating app as well?
Yeah, so she was one of the co-founders of Tinder, and she actually got muscled out of Tinder by the male co-founders. So she actually took them to court later on and like got millions off them basically. I don't exactly know the story, but then she obviously set up Bumble on her own that was more like female-led social dating app, and she's obviously done amazingly well. I want to be her basically.
Amazing. I have a poll for the audience at home, and please feel free to partake as well. Let me get that up live. The question is, when was we'll get into a definition of content marketing from Siobhan in a second, but just before that, interested to see if people know this or not, but when was the term content marketing coined? I'm going to launch the poll now. So it's either 1997, 2007, or 2017. So I'm going to give you some context behind this. And as marketers, we've probably been doing content marketing for as long as marketing existed. Back in the 1950s, we used to look at the value of content towards our customers, and then somewhere after the 1950s, it all changed to talk more about what our products are and how good we are and how good our products are. And we've kind of came full cycle, to now again revisit what our content actually means for our audience. Awesome. So I'm going to end the poll now. I can say the majority of you got it correct. Oh, well, it was the majority. It still is. So 55% of people did get that right. And it was 2007 was when it was coined. So well done to everyone who got that right. But like I said, we have been talking about it, and it's had a number of different names over the years. Some have called it customer media. Some have called it custom publishing. And some have literally just referred to it as branded content. Obviously, the custom media back in the magazine days when they were popular. Siobhan, do you want to give us a bit of an overview of what content marketing is and also what it isn't?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's opinion, isn't it? A lot of people have different understandings of what content marketing is. For me, content marketing should just be simple. It should just be exactly what it says on the tin. So creating content and marketing it. Whether it's through social, PR, email. I know some people call content marketing when it's just content alone on the site, for example, and that's fair enough. But for me, it is more than that. It's also what you do with it once it's gone live. I think especially in this industry, it's so easy to get wrapped up in all the acronyms and abbreviations like CTA, ROI, AOV, that sometimes it's just nice to be asked a question like this and be able to give a simple answer that it, like content marketing is creating content and marketing it. In terms of what it's not shouting about yourself as a brand. It's not about creating a one-way conversation. I think a big part of content marketing is about building relationships and an understanding with your audience. So I think if you just, for want of a better phrase, throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks, that's not content marketing. Like you need to have like a full understanding of how to communicate with the people that you're trying to reach.
Definitely. I think you touched on a really important point then, which was the amplification of the content itself.
Yeah.
A lot of marketers think that it's okay to just push content out there and they expect people to see it, and then they move on to the next piece of content. And actually, if they really were to give some thought, some energy to putting that content in front of the right people, it's going to work a lot harder.
Yeah.
And also you can come up with less ideas because you're sort of...
Definitely. Yeah, if you've got a great piece of content on the site, how easy really is it to turn that into a press release or to take little snippets and post that on social? Like you've already got everything that you need to be able to put it across multiple platforms.
Definitely.
I think from what Siobhan touched on there, I think like from a social point of view as well, like you said about the kind of throwing stuff at a wall and not sticking, I think for me, like the difference between when people kind of talk about content marketing is, like you said, knowing how to amplify it and understanding your audience. And I think from a context point of view, just understanding where your audience are at that specific time when you're sharing in that content. Are they in the right place? Are they looking for your content and all that kind of stuff? And I think a lot of people confuse that. So I think from like a social media, obviously other points of view as well, but from a social media specific point of view, that kind of context and like understanding your audience is like the most important part for me when it comes to kind of amplifying the content as well.
Yeah, definitely. Knowing who your audience is, making the content for them, and then putting it in places where they're hanging out, whether that be online or offline. Cool. I think it's great to set the scene with, what is content marketing, to make sure that we're all aligned and the audience is at home. It'd be great to get, for the audience who are watching at home, it'd be great to get your opinion on what content marketing means to you. So please pop that in the chat. We also have a Q&A section at the bottom of Zoom as well. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, this live event, please do pop them in there and we'll get to them at the end. If they are timely and relevant, we might jump on them straight away. But yeah, just a reminder to please pop that. But yeah, please, if you feel we missed anything of what content marketing means to you, please pop it in the comments. And also just another note before we talk a little bit about the context is, if you do hear any golden nugget lines from this webinar and you want to post them on social, please do use the hashtag #ThriveOnline so we can find them easily, or tag our agency at Hallam Agency. Cool. So we understand what content marketing is. However, this webinar is all about the context. So what is your understanding of context and why is it important? Charlotte, we'll come to you first. We've, as Hannah and Siobhan answered on the last one. What does context mean to you?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, context, I think Siobhan already kind of touched on this in her answer, because I suppose the two are so closely interlinked, but it's about what makes the content meaningful to your audience. And it's about the practice of delivering the right message to the right person at precisely the right moment, I think. So getting your content in front of the right audience and providing value to them. I'm sure Hannah and Siobhan might be able to explain that even better than me, because it's their specialist area. But why it's important, I suppose, if you're going to spend a lot of time and effort and resource generating content, which is hopefully great content, if you don't consider the context, it's potentially going to fall flat on its face and the whole thing is going to be pointless and a waste of money. And I think another key reason why it's so important is because there's just so much content being fired at everyone all the time, every day, day in and day out. And there's so little mental availability with your audience already. so that if you don't consider the context and making sure that that content is super valuable and delivered at the right time, then again you're not going to get the results that you want. But yeah, I don't know if Hannah and Siobhan would agree with that, but
yeah. No, I definitely agree. I was just going to say, like, I think it's like you said, it's all those kind of things, but I think there's like almost like a deeper level into it, like the kind of the timings and the cultural differences and kind of like understanding what people are saying about your brand and like, is it good, is it bad? And then equally like the platform as well. So obviously different platforms have different purposes. So you might share, I know this is a really poor example, but you might share only because you talked about cakes at the beginning, Kieran, so you might share like a recipe for how to bake a cake, for example, and that might do really well on Facebook, but rubbish on LinkedIn because it's just not the right platform for it. So I think it's just about understanding where your content's going to work and where your audience actually want to see these things, because you could create the best piece of content in the world, but if you're sharing it on the wrong platform or kind of to the wrong audience and it's got the wrong kind of wording in it or the wrong emotions or anything like that, it's just not gonna work, essentially.
Yeah, one thing I've been talking about it quite a lot recently is, even if you're in B2B industry, one thing you need to be focusing on is that you're still communicating to a human, so that human to human marketing. So when I was trying to think of an example of what context is, one of the things I was thinking is, if I turn around now and said, I've got a 90 grand cart, I don't. But if that was like something I just said now in the middle of this, it has absolutely no context. You'd be like, what is this idiot going on about? Like, why is she bringing this up? But then later on, if it like tied into another story, that's kind of giving it context, if there was like a reason behind what I was saying. And I think even in like marketing terms, when we're working in businesses, you still kind of need to focus on it like that. Like, why are you saying what you're saying? What benefit is it bringing to the audience? Yeah, not just doing it for the sake of doing it, like what I mentioned earlier about brands just jumping on International Women's Day because they know it's going to get coverage or they know that people are going to see it.
Yeah, something that I always do, just to add to that as well, like when I create content, is literally we'll write down like, what is the customer's pain point, like how does this help them, how does this reach them, like what is the purpose of this post? And I think that's what you mean, Siobhan, like a lot of people will post just for the sake of it, but like understanding the purpose of it and understanding how it can actually help your customer is the context behind it, kind of thing.
That's so right, and I think there's so much to talk about with pain points. We'll definitely get into that in a minute. Hannah, I want to come back to what you said before, and talk. You talked about the usage on different platforms. There's probably a lot of people sitting at home watching this thinking, okay, I know I need to put my content in front of the right people at the right time. Do you have any tips on? And it's a question to all three. Hannah, I think you're suited from a social point of view, but where can you identify where your customers are? Is it a case of testing? You talked about putting that post on Facebook versus LinkedIn. Is it a case of testing your content? Is it a case of looking at the data? Is it a gut feeling sometimes?
I think maybe all three, but which isn't the right answer, maybe not the most useful answer. I think a lot of people don't understand is that like all of the analytics and all the kind of data that goes behind content marketing. So before we do anything, before I post on social media or before me and Siobhan work on a campaign or anything like that, we'll look at the data. So we'll kind of look into the audience analytics and look at what is driving the most traffic to your website. Is it LinkedIn or is it Twitter or is it completely something altogether? Equally, like what kind of hashtags are people are actually talking about? So we're kind of like, I do a lot of searching. So what I'll do is I'll kind of create an idea, come up with an idea, and then have a look at the kind of hashtags that I think might work, and then literally just do a quick search for them and just see what other people are talking about. I think like the power of social listening, I think in like marketing and especially content marketing can like never be underestimated, because it's obviously like you're using that to look into what your audience are talking about, what their understanding is, like how they feel about your brand, and essentially like where they're spending their time online. So once you've kind of got all that information, then yes, you would test it, but you'd kind of already know that this is what I want to do because I've made this decision backed by data, kind of thing, rather than just going, let's just try it on Facebook and hope for the best, which is never the right
one. Charlotte, for you, I suppose from a media point of view as well, when you're looking to amplify your media, there's so many options nowadays. I know we've, as an agency, we've started to look into working with Spotify a lot more, where I suppose context is key for a Spotify ad, even though you're going to be very particular on hitting a particular audience. How do you choose which media avenue to test if you've only got a finite budget?
Yeah, so I mean, I think kind of tying back into what Hannah was saying, it's just making sure that you really do your research. And I think another thing as well with some of the newer advertising opportunities like Spotify, I think you've kind of, in some instances, have to just kind of test before you know sometimes. And with all of our clients, you know, that we take on board now, we always make sure that they allow us like a test and learn budget, because we may not know exactly like which networks are going to work best straight from the off. But I think you can make an informed decision based on research, looking at competitors, what they've been doing, what's worked well for them, you know, doing all your due diligence. But sometimes you do just have to like try things out and see what works, which I know is not necessarily the best answer.
I mean, that test budget makes perfect sense. There's been many a times where I've been in conversations with clients, prospective clients, and they want to know what the ROI is straight away. And you really can't do that because each campaign is different and each audience takes different campaigns.
Yeah. I think just to add to that as well, I think especially with some of the kind of B2B clients that we've been working with recently, is that a lot of them have been quite set in their ways of which platforms they should and shouldn't be using. So like, obviously, okay, we'll use LinkedIn because that's where our audience is, but they won't even consider, you know, using Facebook and Instagram. But then I'm like, well, you know, 3 out of 4 of your competitors are retargeting people on Instagram and Facebook. Because I think, especially for B2B, like young audiences as well that are becoming decision makers at B2B companies, you may want to actually target them on Instagram, which doesn't necessarily seem like a natural choice for B2B. So I think, yeah, try and think about outside the box as well, essentially.
Yeah. We see it so much on YouTube. I mean, if you're a marketer, as most of the people watching this at home will be, you know, when you go onto YouTube, you'll get those marketing video ads constantly. So it does really range. Jumping back into the context part of it, I want to try and pull up a few, maybe some more examples about best and worst examples of context that you've seen. Does anything spring to mind when I say that?
Yes. I don't know if people remember it. I'll show a clip of the video in a second, if not, but Gillette ran a campaign, I think it was in beginning of 2019, around the best men can be. And it was about 3 months after the Me Too movement had kind of really started to take off globally. And Gillette, they decided to run an ad capitalizing on these messages of empowerment. Kieran, do you want to play it first, and then I'll go into a bit of an explanation why I think it's so bad?
Let's give it a watch.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy?
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says he's telling lies.
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie. Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Not cool. Not cool.
Some already are. In ways big
Young men.
and small.
I am strong.
But some is not enough.
So how we treat each other, okay?
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
when you watch it, like on the face of it, the messaging is fantastic. Like I'm not denying that in the slightest, but I think it's quite naive and emasculating and virtue signaling. Because I think what they're saying, or what they're implicating at least, is that most men are guilty of sexual harassment and most men are guilty of toxic masculinity, which we know isn't the case. I think, don't get me wrong, like the idea was there, but the context was completely out. It makes you question, like, why did Gillette feel like they were well placed as a brand to start engaging in that debate? Even from that video, obviously I imported this one from YouTube, it's had 800,000 likes but 1.6 million dislikes. And then Kieran, if you just want to quickly pull up slide 6 as well, you can see some of the coverage that it got. I mean, there's always the question, isn't there, is all publicity good publicity? Or but in terms of talking about context, I guess it was there slightly, but Gillette just had absolutely no reasoning to basically start slagging off 100% of their customers. So yeah, that's my bad example.
That leads on to a perfect question of, how does a brand decide if it's a conversation they should be part of?
I think it's hard to answer, but it should come down to common sense at the end of the day. If your internal marketing teams understand your brand well enough, they should be able to think, again, what I was saying earlier, is if the business was a human with a personality, they should be thinking, if I was this person, would I want to or really have anything relevant to say about it? If not, then just don't get involved. It could be disastrous, like the campaign was for Gillette. And it could look like it's coming from a non-genuine place as well. I know there's been a few studies on this about how consumers evaluate conversations according to, I think it's context, content and form. So I guess just think twice before jumping in, because you shouldn't really say something just because you feel like you should.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing about that Gillette ad as well, is that they weren't really, for me, offering any kind of like what was a really important and serious thing, the Me Too movement and everything that happened with that. They weren't really adding any like anything extra, any like value, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know, maybe if they partnered with like a charity that was like for women's rights, you know, if they'd done something that like showed that they actually really cared, but instead it's like they just took it as a theme and then thought, okay, how can we relate this to our audience?
Yeah.
And like you say, kind of like it was a bit tokenistic and it was sort of piggybacking without actually adding anything to the conversation.
I think one thing that they've done, and maybe feel free to jump in if you disagree, but we talk about brand marketing versus demand marketing. Okay, so your brand is your brand awareness. It's raising awareness of issues that you're involved in, of things that you're doing, of who you are as a brand. And then we have demand marketing, which is more rational. It's more about the purchase. You know, when people are already further along that sales funnel, we want them to convert, and then we can do demand marketing, otherwise known as activation marketing. Now, we know that demand marketing is rational and brand marketing is emotional, or those work best for those two scenarios. But it's kind of like they tried to take emotional and put it in the demand marketing section to try and sell the products. And I think that's where the context for me gets sort of mixed up a little bit.
I have a really good example of this, is the Burger King example that we were talking about this morning. So can you do me a favour? And I've lost the slide, which is on, I think, it might be slide 7.
No worries, I've got it right here.
Slide 7. So this was a post that Burger King literally shared this morning, and I think I literally screenshotted this about half an hour before this, so which was just a ridiculous amount of tweets and retweets and likes and everything in the space of a few hours. But I find this really interesting, and I can't decide how I feel about it. So they tweeted out this initial message that was basically women belong in the kitchen, which obviously not a great message, International Women's Day, but they did like a load of thread tweets about essentially saying that only 20% of chefs are women, and they're basically trying to empower their female employees, and they're basically promoting the fact that they have this kind of new scholarship program. But I'm really undecided as to how I feel about it, because I don't agree with the initial first tweet, but I do think that the social media team or whoever did it for impact. And I think there's that question in marketing of sometimes you can do things that are slightly a bit tongue-in-cheek if you have a good reason for it. And I think they've kind of done that here. Like, obviously what they're promoting is an amazing thing. Like, they're offering women more chance to kind of learn and get in those roles that maybe we're not as prominent in. But I think this is a super interesting example, and I'm really glad that I found this morning before this, of like weighing that up between like how cheeky, for want of a better phrase, can you be for it to also work, because it's got so many tweets. And if you go on Twitter right now, it's Burger King's trending, and like it's obviously worked for some reason. Some people are talking about it, but it's just the issue between like, is it right or is it not? And I'm not entirely sure.
I think it's right, but I think it's only right because they're doing something to support women. I think if they put women belong in the kitchen and then just had the 20% stat afterwards, and weren't doing anything, then yeah, that's a bit.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to what you were saying about like Gillette, in terms of they kind of were talking about it but didn't actually do anything about it. Whereas they're talking about it, but they're actually doing something about it. But it's shocking us in a kind of similar way, but it's working. I don't know. I think that was the worst way to word that, but that makes sense.
Yeah. We talk about it being timely as well, you know, making sure that we're putting it in front of the right people at the right time. 1 minute past 9 on International Women's Day, that tweet was sent out. So it was obviously a well thought out piece of content. Yeah,
100%. Someone's thought, we can make noise with this and let's see what happens. And I think that is the right way to go sometimes. Sometimes you've got to shock people to kind of get spoken about. And I think especially in today, when, like we said, there'll be so many people just jumping on the bandwagon of International Women's Day and just talking about it for the sake of talking about it. It's kind of like, how do you make yourself stand out? And I think I love this and I hate it at the same time. So that's my
It'd be interesting to quickly look and see how long it was between the first post where they said women belong in the kitchen and then the second post. Like, did they leave it an hour to see how much abuse they got on Twitter?
I think they shared it all in one go. I think someone had like queued up all the thread tweets and shared it all at once. But yeah, the internet's gone wild for it.
I mean, I think, you know, Siobhan, you mentioned before about how should you be part of that conversation and things that I suppose you need to bring your own tone of voice to it as well. Burger King obviously have their own tone of voice where, you know, if that was being, maybe if that was on like a law firm's Twitter, it might not be appropriate, but because it's Burger King and we kind of know what to expect from them, you know, it's almost like, you know, we talk about innocence movies having a great tone of voice online and things like that as well. Awesome. I'm just cautious of time. We've got 18 minutes left. So I think what would be really cool is if we jump into talking about your careers so far in the world of content marketing. Just a reminder though, for everyone at home watching the live event, if you do have any questions, please pop them into either the Q&A section or the comment section, and we'll pick those up towards the end. So, I mean, open floor really. Siobhan, if we start with you, mate, you know, just tell the audience at home a little bit about your career, how you got into content marketing, why you're still in content marketing.
So yeah, about 10 years, I studied journalism at uni, and then about 10 years ago, it was I think it'll probably end up in similar stories for quite a few people, and even probably you guys at home, where didn't actually plan to go into marketing, studied journalism, was like, I'm going to go to London and be like London's version of Carrie Bradshaw. Could not get a job in journalism, even for this like horrible tiny startup tech company that was all men. Just give me a job. But in the end, I was in touch with a girl that I played netball with at uni, and she'd been working there about a year for a big SEO agency down in London, and they were setting up a blogger engagement section called Talented Talkers, and they wanted a group of people, it just so happened to be a group of women, to set up this like break off arm of SEO. I guess a lot of you will know that SEO, especially 10 years ago, was very heavily male dominated. So that was kind of where my career started. I was doing a lot of what we now call influencer engagement, but a lot of like sending Alexander McQueen scarves to bloggers and asking them to write on the website and things like that, stuff that you wouldn't necessarily do anymore. So did that for about 2 years. Had a female boss. My first boss in my proper career was a woman, which I loved. Sometimes I learned a lot from her, because sometimes I don't know if she or one of her former colleagues or something might be on here, but she was great outside of work. Loved her. I'm now godmother to her children, and we've got a really great relationship. But in work, she was very like direct and cutthroat, and obviously in a male focused industry within the SEO section, that was a way I think that she felt she had to be in order to compete. Fast forward a few years, worked in content, like doing blog posts and things like that for brands. Then moved into a head of SEO role at a small agency. Again, there the MD was a woman. Absolutely loved working for her. It was that was like my first introduction to having like an equal sex company, because it was such a small agency. We were all on a level playing field, and that was really important for me. Then moved back up to Sheffield about 2 years ago, and kind of moved into like a more of a PR, social content marketing role, and kind of stepped away from the SEO side a little bit. Even though everything I've been doing was content and PR related, I became more focused in what I was working on and kind of knew where I wanted my career to go. So when I moved up here, I took a role in Leeds, which I loved. That was like, I'd managed smaller teams before, but that was like my big management team. I was managing like 11 people there. And I think you learn a lot from the bosses that you've had. Sorry, I feel like I'm just waffling about myself now. I feel like you learn a lot from the bosses that you've had, but more so what you don't want to be. So that's kind of like where I am now, and like how I try to put that into my day-to-day.
Fantastic. I didn't feel for 1 second that you were waffling. That's a great story so far, and I'm just happy it's led you to Hallam. Amazing. Hannah, what about yourself? How has your story differed or been the same?
Slightly shorter than Siobhan's. So this will be my 5 year, fifth year working in content and social, which feels like yesterday I graduated uni, which was terrifying. But yeah, so like you mentioned before, I did a creative writing degree at Sheffield Uni. So I've done the opposite to Siobhan. I moved from London to Sheffield, so we switched places. And so yeah, I did a degree in creative writing, and like Siobhan, no idea what I wanted to do. Absolutely no idea. I remember sitting in my third year uni flat, Googling like, what job can I do with a creative writing degree? Like literally those exact words. And like the thing that kept popping up was marketing. And I was like, I don't really know much about marketing. Like no one in my family's ever done it for a job. So I was like, oh, just see how it goes. So I kind of did a bit of Googling and was like, I think I want to work as a copywriter. So I was like, I've got a degree in writing, I can write. Let's try that. So I emailed everyone, like literally sent out about 500 emails with a really awkward story about myself. It was like a pre-version to the one that you read, Kieran, when I applied for Hallam. And started off with like a month's internship at like a local agency. And then I did a weird thing and moved to a hotel for a year and kind of did their marketing and bits of that. So that was really fun, and did like events and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of did a bit of social there, and that was kind of for me the first time I'd ever done bits of social. And for anyone who knows me will know I'm a grandma, so the fact that I work in social media is quite funny. So, and then I came back, got a job in an agency in just above Sheffield in Barnsley, and worked as a copywriter for a bit. And then the social media team poached me. So I had never had any idea that I wanted to work in social media. I thought you had to be, I don't know what I thought you had to be, but I thought I wasn't it essentially. So I got poached by the social media team, and they were like, oh, you can just try it for a month and see if you like it. And it's now been like 3.5 years-ish, 4 years, and I still work in social, and I love it. And kind of in between that time I've worked for an influencer marketing agency for a bit, and then I've been at Hallam now for about a year. But my job at Hallam is, I think I'm biased, but like the most interesting role, I think, because I like straddle kind of content and social. So I work, Siobhan is my boss as well, which is always fun. I won't comment on what you should or shouldn't be. I'm joking. But no, I think just having, so Siobhan and Charlotte, for people that don't know, are my bosses. And I think for me, working underneath like two cringy but like amazing women, just you learn so much about like how to be, and again, like how not to be, not from you guys, but from like other people. And yeah, essentially I just love what I do and I could never think of doing anything else, even though I accidentally found my way here. I've done what you've done. I feel like I've waffled now, so I'll stop.
Thanks very much, Hannah. Obviously I've heard that before, but it's great to hear it again. Charlotte, what about yourself? How's your journey been? Now the media director at one of the top agencies in the UK.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a wild ride. No, well, I graduated like 10 years ago, or just over 10 years ago. So I guess a kind of similar story to Hannah and Siobhan. Like when I first graduated, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I studied English for my degree. And yeah, I mean, I applied for all sorts of stuff. I applied for some kind of graduate schemes at various places. I also interviewed for MI5 at one point. Had to like go to a secret location in London. Didn't obviously get anywhere, but that was kind of cool. But I always kind of, after about a year of sort of applying for jobs and doing sort of like temp work and stuff like that, it was pretty bad economic time then as well, if I remember rightly. I was like, okay, marketing, I'm pretty interested in marketing. And so I was kind of like looking for any sort of role that I could get in marketing, basically. So I did a couple of internships, did an internship with the Ambassador Theatre Group, which is the biggest theatre company in the UK, which was kind of varied, but had a marketing focus as well, which was really cool. And then I wanted to work in marketing in a theatre, and I actually got offered a job at a theatre in London. And then I realised that I couldn't live in London on like £16,000 a year, which is what they offered. And the theatre pays very badly. So I kind of changed tack, and I was working actually at the University of Nottingham when I applied for the role at Hallam in the careers service there, doing sort of like marketing support. And then I saw the job come up at Hallam, which was digital focused, and I'd not really done sort of digital marketing before. So I kind of applied for it on a bit of a whim, and I know that sounds really bad. It should be like, oh, I really want to work at Hallam, but whatever, it's fine. So I applied for this job, and then I remember going and had an interview with Susan Hallam, who started Hallam back in like 1999. And it was quite a scary interview, to be honest. She asked me some really hard questions, but I remember thinking, okay, this could be a really good job. Like, and obviously I really respected Susan, and well, I still do, obviously. So I was lucky enough to get the role. So I started at Hallam as a digital marketing executive about 7 years ago, and then I've sort of gradually progressed since then. So after a couple of years, I became a team leader, and then we split into specialist teams. At that point, I became head of SEO, and then I was head of SEO for a few years, and then last year I became media director. So yeah, I've had a really good 7 years at Hallam, and really grateful, I guess, for all the opportunities that I've been given. And it's been awesome, and kind of grown with the company, I suppose, as well, and hired people like Hannah and Siobhan and you, Kieran, that have come along and made Hallam literally the best place in the world to work, I believe. So yeah, that's me.
Amazing. Thank you so much to all of you for sharing your stories. Really, really fantastic. And I do believe we have a few students who have joined us for the webinar today. So I hope that those will certainly take inspiration from your journeys. Just to wrap it up, like I said, again, if you do have any questions, please pop them into the comments, and we'll get to them at the end. Before we do that, I want to run through some quick fire fun questions. Okay, so you're allowed one answer each. You can't think too long about it. So the first one is, and also I've actually got one of these set up for the people at home as well. So I'll launch the poll now. You're going to get the third question. So I'll launch the poll now. Okay, so first question is, you have 1 hour a week to spend on content. What do you do for the biggest impact? Hannah, I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, you were going to come to me first. I would Oh, I don't know. It's so hard. I think video. I think if you had an hour, I think I'd create some sort of video, because then you can repurpose it, break it into chunks, and then use the video to create graphics to share on social.
Amazing. Siobhan?
I feel like me and Charlotte might have the same one here. I'd optimize my website copy. Go on.
Is that the same?
I'm going to give a classic SEO answer, which is it depends. No. Yeah, I guess probably write and publish a blog, or engage with the community on social for an hour.
Yeah,
very long, so.
Engaging with the community is a super cool idea. There's so much to learn from customers. Next question. You're allowed to only use one marketing program or platform for the entirety of 2021. What platform is it? Siobhan, you're first this time.
Website.
Your website. Charlotte?
I have also got to say website, because without a website, what are you going to do?
See, I think LinkedIn. I think out of all the platforms, I think LinkedIn has grown the most recently and has changed the most out of all the social platforms, like to become a bit more human. So I would say LinkedIn.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would agree with that. This is the question that was being asked to the audience. How much marketing budget do you think Nike has for advertising and promotions per year? Charlotte, will come to you first. The audience did get a multiple choice.
The multiple choice.
I will give you the multiple choice to make it fair.
Okay.
1.2 billion, 2.4 billion, 3.6 billion, or 4.8 billion?
2.6.
2.4 or 3.4?
Yeah.
And
I'm going 1.2.
Siobhan?
I'll go 3.6.
Siobhan, you got it right. 3.6 billion. And for everyone at home, 33% answered correct. I'll share those results now. That's actually over 10% of their international revenue. They make 30 billion a year. This is in dollars, by the way, so they make $30 billion a year, and they reinvest 3.6 billion on promotional and advertising spend. So if you wondered how much money you should have for your marketing budget, about 10%. Is not a bad option if you want to speak to your CFO about that. Last question. Which brand makes you purchase from them with great content?
Oh,
Anna, back to you.
I have an instant answer for this. I'm obsessed with a brand. It's like a sustainable sportswear brand called Tala. They've literally just launched. It's by their CEO's Grace Beverly. She's like started off as like a fitness influencer, but now she's like a CEO of companies, and she's amazing. But their content has like a massive focus on like body positivity and sustainability and all that kind of stuff. And they share some really good like helpful content on social. And I purchase everything from them, every launch that they do. That's
awesome. Charlotte, do you have one?
Yeah, so I think mine would be Mob Kitchen. So they're like essentially a recipe page on Instagram, but they sell cookbooks and various things related to making food, essentially. I guess, yeah, the reason why I chose them is that they engage so well with the community, and they call it the mob. So they call all the people who follow them the mob, and then they get involved with various things like Veganuary and like kind of social stuff as well that's actually relevant to their audience. So yeah, that would be my favorite.
Excellent. And Siobhan, do you have a favorite brand?
I know it's really obvious and really generic, but Innocent, I just think they're fantastic. I think they're hilarious. A few years ago, I went to an event and I was presenting, but there was a social media manager from Innocent was presenting as well. And he was just as funny in real life as he is on Twitter. Like, they have free reign to do whatever they want. It was one of the best talks, because they don't even have any guidelines, which obviously as a brand a lot of people will be like, no, you're not just going away and doing what you want, but they literally just do whatever they think's funny, and it works. I think it's great.
Amazing. We have a couple of questions, and I think we'll have time to answer two. Siobhan, the first one's for you, and the question is, how do varied content formats help with providing context?
for data visualization, I think it is quite important. So if you've got a piece of data heavy content, then you're going to have to give it more context by visualizing it, basically. If you've got loads of information, loads of data, you don't just want to write it out in a really long article. Also, if you are doing data visualization, if you've got it doesn't even have to be like a really thought out design piece. It could just be something that you put together on PowerPoint or something like that. You can repurpose those visualizations for social, for example. It's just going to help share the message, gain attention, explain your story even more, all the while giving it more context, because you can actually show comparisons, for example, rather than just trying to explain it. So yeah, I think the key is to think about the main message you're trying to get across and what is the best format. Like Hannah, you mentioned video content earlier. Is it something where someone needs to be talking to a camera and explain what's happening, or do you need to show what's happening? It's not always like go-to editorial, because especially in this day and age, you can have different formats quite cheaply as well.
Right. And another question is more about engagement on websites and how you can use, how the understanding of content versus context on a website for engagement. Charlotte, you're probably best to answer that one.
Yeah, so I guess when it comes to your website, you need to make sure you're providing viable content for where your visitors are in their journey with your product, service or brand, and then use context in the right way to actually push that content to them in the right place at the right time. So an example might be, a user has looked at around your website and they've left without buying the items in their cart. So then you might send them a cart abandonment email, which is very kind of pertinent to them. Or maybe they've downloaded the white paper and visited certain pages on your site, so you email them a case study. So that's a couple of examples where you can push content out that's like super relevant and valuable based on how users have interacted with your website. Amazing.
You mentioned life cycle, and I thought you were going to answer the next question, which was, should companies use different content formats at different levels of the consumer life cycle? Hannah, we'll come to you for that one.
Yes, essentially. So we work kind of by like a 4-stage funnel here at Hallam. So it's like awareness, consideration, conversion, and then kind of like your sharing and stuff. So yeah, 100%. So if you imagine if you are in the awareness stage, like if you imagine you don't know who the brand is, you've never really heard of the business before, you're just kind of browsing, you'd kind of, as a brand, as a business, you'd want to share more content that kind of shared your benefits and like spoke about how people would kind of why people would want to purchase from you and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if someone's further down the funnel and they're kind of at that conversion stage and they know who you are and they think, yeah, I think I want to order from them, but I'm not 100% sure, then that's when you kind of offer slightly different content, like maybe your kind of offers or your discounts, etc. So yeah, I think it's just about understanding where your customer is and making sure that you're tailoring your content to reach them at a specific moment that they are, rather than, like Siobhan said, just throwing everything at everything and hoping for the best, which you should never do.
That makes perfect sense. Listen, we're a little bit over on time, so we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for everyone who has attended at home. I've been saying you're at home. I imagine you're at home. You might be in the office, I'm not too sure. But yeah, thank you very much for coming along, and hope you have enjoyed the event as much as I have, and hope you have a wonderful day. We will put more information about what we've been talking about in an email afterwards and send it round. If you do want to have a chat with Hannah, Siobhan, or Charlotte, we'll pop something in the email for you to make that possibility as well, if preferable. But listen, thanks for everyone at home, but more importantly, thank you for my 3 colleagues for joining me today. We've had the amazing Hannah Tomaszewski, the wonderful Siobhan Congreve, and the fantastic Charlotte Tomlinson. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, and I shall catch you all later.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.